So the first question is, how did you meet the services and needs of students with IEPs during virtual learning, or how do you plan to do that this upcoming school year? We have people from charters, we have people from publics, we have people who are PhD, college level, we have non-public special ed on the line, we have therapists on the line, curriculum writers, all of the above. So we have a varied experience here. So let's start off actually with our administrator on the line, Mr. Chapman. How did Forbush meet the needs of the students at your school, or how do you all plan to do that?
Okay, so what we've done is different jurisdictions have given us their stipulations as far as what they want us to do as far as meeting needs. The biggest thing for us is just maintaining due diligence. Really, you have some families who are overwhelmed, some families who are unable to participate just because of the paradigm shift that has occurred due to the pandemic. So what we've done, there are documents that we've modified the IEPs to ICLPs, individualized continual learning plans. And it basically pinpoints some of the major goals and objectives that the kids are working on, because obviously we're not able to implement the IEP as is in this situation. So we modify it and we address those particular goals and objectives in academics, related services, and we provide speech language, occupational therapy, and physical therapy in some aspects. So what we've been doing is just staying aligned with what the school systems and what the different jurisdictions require as far as what our distance learning plan incorporates for giving instruction and for giving related services. So it's definitely been a paradigm shift. It's definitely been a whole different way of provision, but through the Zoom platform, through the Google Meet platform, we are able to reach out to those families that are able to participate, and we give services in that fashion.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. Let's jump into actually Miss LeRay. Let's speak to you about how did you provide speech services when we went to the virtual learning space, and how do you plan to either change that or continue what you're doing?
Sure. So I didn't mention in my introduction that I've been in urban education I'm going into my 11th year. I'm now in a DC public charter school. I've also been in DCPS, BPS, and New York state schools. So this has been unprecedented, as we all know. I believe that adjusting to distance learning was all about collaboration as a specialist. It was important to ensure that students receive their services, yet not to overwhelm the families, which became a factor. And so collaborating with my colleagues who were both specialists, so ABA, as well as teachers, really relying on teachers to ensure that not only are we getting our services, but that the scheduling was going to allow for overall effective instruction for the kids. So collaborating was my number one strategy, and I'll continue to do that using the platforms that we're designated to use strategically and creatively.
Thank you. Let's welcome our panelists. Dr. Chioma, you introduce yourself and what you do.
Hi, yes. My name is Chioma Oruh, and I'm a parent of kids in the DC public school system. Both my sons are on the autism spectrum. I do a few things. I started my company, which is Bornfree LLC. So I support businesses and individual families in terms of consulting for businesses and coaching for families. I see Toby Long is here, and Toby Long is, one of my great mentors. I got a certificate in early intervention from the Georgetown Center, and I for child and human development, and I use that as part of lots of lessons I learned in that program. I use it in my coaching with families, mostly birth to 8 families are who I support, but focusing on birth to 3 as they transition into school age. And in terms of businesses, I mostly focus on behavioral health and other supports that families will need for the systems to recognize our existence is part of not just a child focus, but a family focus, is in having a 2-generational approach to any agency or any business that's intending to be ADA compliant, or just accommodating to families just because it's the right thing to do.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Oruh. We kind of missed you for our, I guess, game session, breaking the ice session just before. So hopefully we'll get a chance to break the ice with you a little bit later. So the question that we have posed right now, and thank you for our attendees for asking some great questions. The question that we still have right now is, how did you meet the services of students with IEPs during virtual learning, and how do you plan to do that this upcoming school year? So we started with an administrator, and we went to our speech language pathologist. Let's go over to actually future Dr. Kelly.
Well, I think I approach this a little differently because I am currently at the University of Maryland and a part of sort of these large-scale research Institute for Education Science funded research grants. And one thing that I've been wrestling with my colleagues there is the idea that we need to be more inclusive of involving families and involving teachers and other sort of practice-based professionals in our research grants, because a lot of it is often dictated by the interventionist, which is often the researcher currently. And so I think what we're experiencing now is really going to challenge the way that we conduct research, and potentially in a more inclusive way, which may be a benefit. And I know that's the way I'm going with my current dissertation research. I was going to, my focus is on reading comprehension, and I was going to deliver sort of a book reading intervention where I read one-on-one with a child. And currently I'm conceptualizing training a parent participant or parent participants. And so I'm really facilitating that book reading for the parent, and just sort of seeing how it works and what the effects are for their child. So that's one way that I'm thinking about and planning going forward.
Excellent. Let's continue with Miss Bell Amison.
Hi, everybody. So for me, I've been in the education field since 2009. I've been a licensed practitioner since 2013. So for me, I provide social and emotional and behavior supports to my students. And so what that looks like is very different everywhere. But for me, I have students that are on the autism spectrum. So I see them individually, and we do a lot of just work in their goals and whatever they're working towards. A lot of them are working towards social skills aspects. So I also put them in small groups. So it's like 2 or 1 other person with them, and we engage in play via Zoom or via whatever the platform is to help keep those skills and help keep building those skills. And then my other students that have those behavioral needs, I still see them. I will push into their Zoom classrooms. This upcoming year, we have a different schedule, which I think will be very nice. We're doing an inclusive model. And so our students will be with IEPs with gen ed students, and then their special ed teacher will be supporting them in that setting along with their related service providers. So speech will be supporting, mental health will be supporting, occupation will be supporting, and then there will be breakout rooms. So that will also be another way to get that support and then seeing them individually.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Let's swing over, actually kind of continuing that conversation about behavioral support to Ms. Dashiell.
Yes, so during COVID, unfortunately, we didn't expect, of course, this to happen. So it was a little bit of a challenge as far as meeting behavioral needs over the virtual platform. So a lot of the strategies, what I've been doing and what my team has been doing is that we have been actually doing a lot of video modeling, also to working, specifically, working specifically with parents to kind of like support them in as far as working on those transitions and what that realistically looks like at home. Because we're not in a school setting, building that structure is very challenging for a lot of parents. So setting up like visual schedules, providing like those reinforcements, those sort of supports that kind of like help assist them in their everyday routines. Also too, we also have been using reading because that is one of our tools based in with my company. And so we've been using that as a support intervention that they can use to build engagement, also to push that language, those fun stuff with the ABA resources.
Thank you very, very much. Let's actually change it up a little bit. Let's have Dr. Oruh come in and just speak to, since you're a parent advocate, speak to how were services met for IEPs for families that you may work with or your own children during COVID virtually. How did that experience go?
Well, I'll start for my own kids. My kids go to a non-public school. They go to the Frost School, which is a year-round school, and so school is still in session. And I think you take a break next week, which is actually really stressful under these conditions because I'm required pretty much to prop them in front of a computer a number of times a week without a lot of breaks. But I'm fortunate, in that I do have a working computer. Like my kids are DCPS students, so we did get the Chromebooks, and those Chromebooks are awful. I've tweeted about it. I haven't gotten a response. I think they started sending out like a technology survey since then, and I'm glad to see that happening to get real good feedback, because if my Chromebooks, are just not up to par, I can just imagine what that is like for the greater span of families. And for families that I actually do support, technology actually is the least of their concerns, right? Like when you're a family that was already in crisis before COVID, or when your child was in crisis before COVID, it just spirals down and out without a lot of supports. So I've sat in on IEP meetings with families, and we have tried to talk through accommodations like a visual schedule or, and other kinds of tools and tips that the families can use, but nothing really beats having that hands-on support. And I look forward to us getting to a place where kids who really need it and families who need that wraparound service can find a place where they're getting accommodated, if not just in the schools, but maybe Medicaid should also be stepping in and be accommodating to families who may not have previously gotten healthcare benefits, but should be eligible now considering the circumstance.
Thank you so much,
So
Dr. Oruh.
Can I pop in?
Go ahead, Dr. Long. I was about to call on you next, actually.
Yeah, Chioma knows me, so she must be saying, oh, she must be sitting on the edge of her seat, ready to pop in. I think what everyone has been saying is so important and leads to sort of the need to have such strong collaboration among all team members, families, related service providers, especially the teacher and the special educator, because the reality is that we are all here to support the teacher to teach all the children in her classroom as best as she can teach them. And so to understand what she wants to accomplish on that IEP and what the expectations of that classroom are really critical. So I think in some ways, although I'm the first to admit that this has been very, very difficult to be at home, we should look at it as an opportunity to think really creatively. I know for myself, with the undergraduate students who have accommodations and modifications, actually the Zoom platform or the distance learning platform actually allowed us a lot more flexibility to do some accommodations and say, what are all our different strengths in the classroom, and how can I think creatively to build activities that build on those strengths so that the students are not left behind. When we do our traditional sort of classroom lecture, we take for granted that everybody's going to gather the information. I think what we learned is, as teachers, we could not take for granted that everybody out there in Zoom land is gathering all the information. So collaboration among us all to build on the individual strengths of the children, I think, are really, really critical, and the families, because ultimately the kids are, as Chioma said, sitting in their kitchen at their computers, and the mother or the father is sitting right beside them doing their work.
Thank you for sharing, Dr. Long. I want to swing over to actually, let's do Mr. Johnson, and kind of like building off of what Dr. Long said about meeting the services and the collaboration piece, and just share your experience of what you did at your school and also what you all are planning to do.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I just want to thank everyone. Like, your transparency is so needed, I think, at this time. I think it's really important for us to name and express to others the fact that this is extremely challenging. Like many have said, we are in really unprecedented times. And so I don't know if anyone feels as though they truly have everything figured out. In the spring, when it caught everyone, off guard, obviously at the time, our number one goal was to just provide as much normalcy as possible, which is almost like ridiculous to even bring up when you talk about, virtual learning, because it's hardly any normalcy, right? But that looked like meeting families where they were, taking into consideration there are some families who have multiple students in the household. How do we not overwhelm parents and tie up, one phone line? How do we make sure that our, students on the other side of the river are having the same access as those students who may have the opportunity to attend private institutions? So all of those things are constantly on the forefront of our mind and are things that aren't going away. As we approach the fall, I think Mr. Chapman spoke on the ICLIP, the ICLP forms. And the hope there is that we're able to go through students' IEPs, identify and prioritize those goals that we feel are most imminent to their development, and really develop a plan to implement those. We're approaching this in the spring. We kind of, as I stated, we're trying to respond to the crisis at hand. And so we were meeting families. Each student had an individual scheduled time to meet with their teacher. Sometimes that happened in one-on-one sessions. Sometimes that looked like the teacher sending out invites to multiple students to join like a small group. I think that we did a relatively good job. However, that's not something that was necessarily feasible for everyone. I think that teachers became burnt out. I think over time, families also did as well. And understanding that families' work requirements forced them to change schedules that may have been set in stone. So as we approach the fall, we're attempting to create a space where like students can come to, so to speak. And so having set hours versus what we did in the spring, which was having individualized sessions for students. And with that being the case, within those hours of school, of our school day, we're trying to implement, again, like I said, that instruction and prioritize those goals. We've also taken the time to go through each student's IEP and individual profile to identify things that they may need that weren't on their IEP before when it comes to assistive technology, which students would benefit from text-to-speech in this particular setting, being that, when they're in school, they have those visual representations from their teachers. Things like that all are, again, just on the forefront of our mind, and us trying to be as proactive as we can. But again, just the human side of it. I don't think it's a one size fit all. It's not a one solution, and each kid and each family need something different. So when we approach it with that equity-based mindset, I think we have a better chance of being successful.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Ms. Pinckney, could you jump in here and tell us how did your school district, because you're not in the DC DMV area, so we're kind of curious because you're in the Philadelphia area. How did your district handle meeting the needs of students with virtual learning who have IEPs?
Well, I want to first start off with thanking you, Mr. Smith, for putting all this together. Thank you very much for inviting me. Couple of things that I want to touch on. One thing that I noticed beginning
Is there a, seems like Ms. Pinckney is stuck in the Zoom zombie land, as I like to call it. So we'll give her a moment to get back together. Okay, I'll mute her for now, and hopefully that'll give her some time to get back together. I'm not sure what happened. But while we're getting Ms. Pinckney together,
process. They went to
there we go.
What about, okay.
Let's start you again with the question because you kind of like broke up on us.
I'm sorry. I was saying that the digital divide was something
So we're trying to figure out the technical glitch, but in the meantime,
to overcome.
There we go. Sorry about that, everyone. We'll try to see what's going on with the tech for the audio for that. But let's actually move on to the next question because it seems like there are a lot of questions around this actually that Mr. Johnson kind of led into. I'm going to skip around a little bit and combine this question. Like, what are some strategies and or resources that we can give to either families or teachers or related service providers with supporting students with IEPs virtually? Let's start off with Miss Bell Amison.
So definitely for structure, schedule, bedtime routine, a morning routine, a space that is less distracting in high traffic areas, having the area prepared, having the computer there, having a snack, paper, pencil, markers, the things like you would if you were in school, and having that in a space that is not distracting, making sure there's not people walking around and the TV is very loud and the siblings are going back and forth. So making sure that those are there and that morning and bedtime routines are really, really big. Making sure there's headphones if they can. If it's a student that needs some additional accommodations like fidgets, or they might need things like that around them, that's fine too. But having that in the area or space that they're already in, just so that way that structure is there as if they were in school every day. And then calling out to their related service providers. I know I provide those support services. Our schools are willing to send fidgets to families through Amazon. It just needs to be known so that we can help support in those areas. So if this is a kid that uses rubber bands on their chair because they need to sit and move, and if they have different things for squishies and all those things that are very much used in school and they need them at home, they just need to let someone know at the school, and most times they will be able to help provide or get something of that sort. So those are some really big key things that that nightly routine, that morning routine, and then a quiet place to be in with all the items you need for that day.
Thanks for sharing. Let's actually switch over to Jerae Kelly, and see what strategies or resources, especially coming from your research, do you think would be supportive for families and students with IEPs virtually?
I mean, I have to probably defer to the practicing people on the panel for that. However, one thing at a more macro level, I think as we move to distance learning potentially being a thing for a very long time and increasing, is that, and I say this in every special education conversation, IDEA has never been fully funded by the government of what was authorized. It's never broken, I think, 15%. And that's because it's a part of the discretionary funds and not a part of the mandated funds like Medicaid. And so one thing that is super important is to advocate for that full funding and make it a necessary support service, because we know it's health related. It's, you know, it's so integral to the needs of students and families that I can't, it frustrates me so much. So just moving to like more advocating and like policy level changes, that's something that's going to need to happen. And with those additional funds, you know, I would even advocate giving funding or a stipend for families, because ultimately they're becoming the service providers, right? So, you know, providing that funding for the families, I think is just so important. So that's something that I would just say moving forward. But for the strategies right now, I'm just going to defer to the people that are practicing in the field.
Thank you very much. Yeah, go ahead, Ms. LeRay.
I love what Ms. Kelly said, because one of the main strategies that I have found to be the most effective had nothing to do with direct service. It had to do with leaning into that professional skill of coaching families and empowering families and honoring them as now the hands and feet of what we're supposed to be getting done for their child. I think I spent a lot of sessions as a professional making sure that I understood well enough why we were doing what we were doing, how it aligned with the student's overall learning profile, so that I could communicate that to families so that they had buy-in enough outside of the screen time. And I found that to be super, super effective, more than the coloring sheets, the websites, the resources for them to read. It was really being like, how you doing today, Mom? How you feeling? What's going on? XYZ is working on this. What do you think about that? Can you think of ways that this is useful in the house? Let's spend the first 5 minutes doing that. Let's spend the last 5 minutes. How did that go today? I noticed little Johnny had a little bit of difficulty. How, you know, what are ways that you feel like we can? So really bringing the families into that, again, collaborative model, I feel has been such an extreme strategy. And just commending them and celebrating them each and every time we're on screen with them has helped to just see a bit of carryover where it matters most.
Thank you very much. Let's actually jump to Mr. Chapman about strategies and resources for students with IEPs and their families. I think you're on mute, Mr. Chapman.
Sorry,
there you go.
I'm on mute now. I apologize. Basically, what we've done is we've partnered with a lot of our community resources, a lot of our stakeholders that provide wraparound services for us, especially with the behavioral services, because that's been an area where we've been hit really hard because it's difficult to implement BIPs virtually. So with that being said, we have partnered with side agencies to assist, and some agencies are actually still going into the home, providing ABA services, providing behavioral support services. At a point it had stopped, but I see that it's gradually starting to pick up now. So behaviorally, that's how we've been able to deal with that, and providing those partners that we have. We've given that information to parents, and we've made that available, and we hope that they avail themselves to those services and have those supports in place, because we know it's difficult for them to provide education or to even access education at this point. So we've done a lot of partnering, we've done a lot of collaborating with those side agencies to make sure that the students get the best services that they can.
Thank you. I know, Ms. Dashiell, I think you would like to jump in on this about the services, especially with Mr. Chapman talking about ABA and going into the home and things of that sort. Could you share some strategies and resources with us, please?
Well, I will say this. I think one of the biggest challenges that I have consistently seen with our parents in this population is that, one, just reminding them that it's okay to be okay. So just understanding that the behaviors are going to happen. They happened when they were at school. And so we just have to collaborate and work together in targeting the behaviors. So realistically, I think that I know what I've commonly seen is that parents want their child to be sitting at the computer for all this length of period of time and things of that sort. And what I try to stress to my parents is that let's be a little bit realistic about what those goals look like at home. You know, when we're in the school, we can kind of like put that expectation there, because we can build in strategies and resources and things to support, to encourage that participation. But now that it's home, because this is home, this is their environment. We're coming into your environment now. So what that looks like is that we need to have more frequent breaks. We need to have like a reward system for them. You do this, then you get this. And so setting up those kind of expectations or whatever can build for the longevity of the school year. We have not started back up. I know that some ABA companies are going back into the home, but some are still doing it virtually. I know we are still doing it virtually. So right now, I just think that is just it might not be 100% the best solution, but it's the safest solution, I think, for both parties.
Thank you for sharing. Ms. Pinckney, I was actually about to go to you. Go ahead.
I just want to piggyback a little bit on what Mr. Shaw said. Definitely some of my students that had behavioral problems, I took assistance from my parents. Back to what you were saying as far as collaborating together and bringing everybody in together made a major difference in regards to not just getting on that laptop, but also sitting next to your child and working with your child when I was teaching or giving my instructional delivery to the students. Also setting up my office hours to where they could talk to me after the lesson, where everyone was off of my Google Classroom platform, where I can be more one-on-one with the parent and the student by giving them some suggestions that I had for helping them move along more on their educational journey. Another thing that I noticed was that if the technology wasn't that great, I could stay on with them and also go through the nuts and bolts of the technology, or I looked at myself as tech support. And that was also helping, because one thing that I took for granted was that oftentimes we think kids want to be on the computer for hours and hours and hours, but that is not the case. A short screen time was something that I saw very productive with students with various needs educationally. And coming to a closure, I would say that we need to definitely look at other opportunities to have kids one-on-one that have IEPs, and different signals that they can give that they may be getting something or they may not be getting something. Whereas being a general ed teacher, I can assist them along with the special ed teacher.
Can you all hear me again? Okay. So now we're back again. So let's actually go over to Dr. Long, what strategies or resources do you think would be particularly useful for families with students with IEPs virtually?
Well, building off of something that Tamara had said earlier on, I think that we as educators need to think about we're here to help children learn rather than help them go to school. And learning occurs 24/7. So helping families understand their routines or opportunities for learning. You know, obviously it may be easier with the little ones because you can build in more learning opportunities during breakfast and lunch and just everyday routines. But I think that's the creative part of being a teacher, on how can I use this long period of time that these parents are with their kids and build in what the parents need, what the kids need, and use that whole day. Not think, okay, the child's got to go to school from 9 to 3, and that we have to fill up that period of time like they do traditionally. It's like, and then let them do whatever. Let's see what happens the rest of that time before 9 o'clock, after 3 o'clock, and how can we build in those lessons, which I think in the long run will help the parents sort of appreciate how kids learn. And then they too will think as creatively on creating more opportunities rather than just watching a movie or putting them in front of a screen as something for them to do. I also think that we focus on kids on IEPs that have special education needs, but I think what we're finding is that all kids benefit from these strategies. And that no kid likes to sit in front of a screen all day long, unless they're playing something that they're interested in. But, you know, they want differences and they want to share what they have available to them with their peers. Maybe that in the long run will help us all become better teachers for all kids and help inclusion be a lot easier to accept because we're finding out that even those kids that might sit there in the classroom very nicely, when you have them in a different environment, they may act very differently.
Thank you, Dr. Long, for that and bringing the inclusion piece into that. Dr. Oruh, could you share also what strategies and resources, since you're a parent advocate, that you would really suggest to your families with students with IEPs in the virtual learning space?
Sure. So I want to just preface what I'm going to say in that my discipline, my PhD's in political science. So I'm always kind of coming at, even with the how I interact and interface with families from that framework, right? Like what is the ideal and then what is the real, right? What, and the spectrum of that and where their power is in both ends. So, you know, coupling with some of the tools that I think have been stated before, really having families set up a routine and getting the support that they need, really mapping out using ecosystems that, you know, we learned in the early intervention program, like really mapping out what their support system looks like now. Who they think was gonna be there for them may not be there for them in this period. Who they think at the point of contact or the go-to to get what they need to get done may not be. So you really have to be realistic about what is possible in this moment to get through, especially if you're an essential worker or a single parent. You really want to prioritize your kids, but you have all these other things going on, right? And so really mapping out who is around physically, who can be around in a safe way, and who can help you get through the day, the week, the month. The other part about that in the ideal is that, yes, I do believe that families have a right to be accommodated. I mean, per the law. And I totally hear that IDEA is not fully funded, but somehow that's not an excuse for states to not meet their obligation, which I fully support any campaign to say, let's get that thing fully funded, but it's not an excuse. So what I recommend for families in the same time as problem solving, and if their school is a, you know, amicable party and as part of their support system to involve them in that, But in any case, keep a log. That notebook is your friendly reminder of what is not working during this period. Like, write down periods of when your kid behaviors are spiked, when they're not spiked. You should become a documenter of what's going on in your kid's academic learning, because you will and should. And I think it's healthy for the system to receive state complaints or due process complaints as they may be needed, to be able to really know what's happening and how the entire system can accommodate for all the kids who may have missed lapse of services, who may be regressing in their skills, who may not be getting all that they needed during this time. So it's a both and strategy, and I hope that the state complaint is not seen as antagonistic, because the state really does need some corrective measures. A lot has come up in this time.
Thank you, Dr. Oruh. We're going to finish before we get to the Q&A, because I want to respect everyone's time. We're going to finish with Mr. Johnson with strategies and resources for students with IEPs and their families in the virtual space.
Sure. I think sort of leaning into everyone's sentiments about collaboration, I think that it's extremely important for us to be flexible during this time. And what I mean by that is, you may have a schedule that is set that you and parent agree on, and over time you all notice for varying reasons that schedule is not working in the best way that you had hoped for. I think it's always a best practice with students who receive services to treat anything that's on the IEP or on those ICLPs as living documents, and be willing to come to the table time and time again to talk about and communicate what the things that are working and the things that are not. So similar to Dr. Oruh just said, excuse me if I pronounced that wrong, I think that it's extremely important for parents to log and give real-time feedback of what's happening. And I think that it's also important for teachers to do the same thing. And I think if that happens, you guys will be able to come to the table and share some of the things or trends that are similar, and then respond with best practices moving forward. So I guess to say, I think a best practice is to make sure that you're constantly documenting and coming to the table as many times and as often as possible to communicate the things that you see, both from the student, from the parent at home, as well as the teacher who's delivering instruction.
Mr. Smith, can I jump in for one quick second?
Sure. We got 1 minute for you.
Okay, just one strategy. I had a parent who would sit in my virtual class. She manned my chat for me. That helped me with more one-on-one with my students and individually with class discussions. It helps so much as far as having that extra hand. And I just want to say, if parents and teachers collaborate together, sky's the limit. You get so much more done.
I just want to add one other point. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Smith.
Go ahead.
I just want to add one other point. And also too, as we are moving into this transition of a new world of how we're delivering services, I think that it's also too important that we also look at our data. And so, like, how are we collecting the data to actually utilize it and see what it actually is effective and what actually is ineffective? I think we have always referred to things or whatever that has been so evidence-based, and we should be using evidence-based practices. However, we also too have to actually gauge it and measure it and see if it actually is working with our student population as well. So I think data is extremely important during this time.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Dashiell. So now we are right on time, man. I'm prompt. So we're going to start our Q&A section. We're going to have it for about 5 minutes. The first question, I'm sure the panelists can see it in the Q&A, is what are the benefits to virtual learning for students with special needs? How can teachers and families work together to highlight students' virtual learning strengths? Who would like to jump in and start that?
I don't mind jumping in. I actually had a thought as, you know, everyone with all of the experts were sharing about how students present like behaviorally or socially emotionally. I actually found in the spring there were several students who you know, had like FBAs or BIPs, you know, while we're, you know, as part of their services to help support them. And they had much more success in a virtual space, being able to sit in the comfort of their own home and not having those other environmental factors that sometimes could be triggering to them present. And so I thought that it was so interesting. I had one student in particular who stands out a lot, who I feel as though made a lot more reading progress, and I think even surprised himself, just because some of those, again, those environmental factors that he encounters each day that may have, you know, distracted him or triggered a certain behavior, they just weren't present. And so I just wanted to name that for some students, the virtual space has been beneficial to them if they are able to have tailored instruction on the things that they need. So.
Before you jump in, Ms. Amison, I wanted to kind of get Mr. Chapman in there as an administrator for that question. What strengths have you seen for kids kind of like holistically throughout your school? They're like, what strengths did they have in a virtual space? And then we'll get to Ms. Amison.
So what we've seen is actually my population, we work with the autism population and the intellectually limited population. So that has been particularly challenging to get them to, you know, just sit in front of the computer and actually access services. So what I've seen is that some of those kids who may have not been able to function like that when they were in school are acclimating pretty well to the virtual learning platform. What we've been doing is we've been having some of my ABSs, which are my assistant behavior specialists, sit in on those sessions and redirect the kids and give the parents strategies on how to keep the kids engaged. And I heard someone mention earlier about the extended breaks or more frequent breaks rather, and that has been particularly helpful and useful in that element. So definitely I've seen progress that was surprising. It's like they almost know, we think that their cognition is at a certain level, but really it's above and beyond what we expect because they are able to, you know, acclimate themselves and still participate. So I've seen definitely a high level of participation from my students in particular.
Excellent. Ms. Amison, could you jump in there? What strengths have you seen for kids who have IEPs in a virtual space?
I definitely echo with both Mr. Chapman and Mr. Johnson. A lot of the students are getting individualized speech, individualized OT, individualized mental health practitioner support. Like, it's a lot, and it's normally something that is with a bigger group of kids or it's a small group. They're getting that individualized time, which has been, a lot of my families absolutely love it. And then they're also learning, what does speech do? How can I help as a parent? Oh, I didn't know that these little simple things that I can be modeled now because I'm on video, I can watch and show and know how to do those things with my child, because they're going in and out of the school building. Hey, how you doing? And going out. But now they're actually sitting with them and they can see the different strategies. I have a lot of students that have FBAs and BIPs, and they're not having those same behavioral issues at home because they have those strategies that were taught, those strategies that they are like, oh, I can get up and take a break, or they know how to advocate for themselves. It's been, for some families, I have students that have had no behavioral issues because they are in a good element and they're getting that individual time that they need to help work on those goals. And families are doing really well with that. And they're enjoying the fact that they're learning more about what speech does and what does OT do and what does the behavior services look like, and getting that. And a lot of families are enjoying that piece.
Thank you. We actually have a question from our Facebook Live folks. We are beginning to see more parents file complaints against school districts because IEPs are not being fully implemented. Beyond documentation and parent meetings, what should we be doing to address the gaps between general education and special education when it comes to scheduling? Actually, I wanted to kind of see before I wanted to see what Dr. Long, would you like to jump in here?
Sure, I think this brings up a really critical issue in education. This seemingly divide between general education and special education. I wish we would move to an education system that's education for all, and everyone gets what they need. So in some ways, the special educators, the parents or families have gotten used to all these individual services of knowing that their child's going to get occupational therapy twice a week, or speech language pathology 3 times a week, or the ABA therapist is going to work with them individually. I think we need to be better at explaining how we support one another in helping the child reach those goals on the IEP that everyone has agreed to. You know, I often think that we agree to IEPs and then they put away, and it's only the teacher that is responsible. But we're all responsible for those IEP goals because they're the child's goals, the student's goals. They're not the OT's goals or the PT goals. And helping families and our colleagues understand that's a process, I think, is one important first step. An understanding that it's sort of a continuum of service provision rather than distinct individual categories of service, although that's how we've always been presenting it.
Thank you. And our last question from the Q&A is, I'll direct it to Ms. Kelly first. Mr. Johnson spoke about family burnout, which I imagine will be prevalent in the fall. Did anyone have some successful strategies for re-engaging families after they had checked out? So Ms. Kelly, if you feel free to answer it, you're more than welcome to. If you you used to be in the classroom, so what would you suggest for families who are dealing with the burnout?
I mean, again, I've been out of the classroom for a while, so I feel a little not super confident in answering this question. But I mean, again, just like we're talking about collaboration, making sure that parents and getting together and speaking with one another, sharing strategies that helped, and that's really the only thing that I can say kind of confidently. But
Excellent. Dr. Oruh, would you like to share about family burnout and what they can do to combat it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really important for families. What I say that's reaffirming and reinforcing is that it's okay to take a break, even as the power dynamic is off. And there are instances that we've seen, like in Detroit, of kids getting pinged for, you know, truancy at this time. I think it's still important, as long as you remain in communication with your team and you are in the spirit of collaboration, and not just for topical, but for, you know, but truly in the best interest in you are part of the interdisciplinary team. I think what's unfortunate is that if a school environment has not already created that culture of collaboration and interdisciplinary spirit, then it's really a hard sell for a parent who's already burnt out and stressed out to now be included in the situation. But it's not a lost game. I think that, you know, from my end, what I do as an advocate is to really encourage them to assume their power where it is and to step out when you need a break, because nothing's going to get done, especially if all's on your shoulder, if you are breaking down, because everyone's mental health is important in this moment. And I agree with what Ms. Kelly had just said earlier around, like, families should also be receiving some kind of financial compensation to leverage everything that's happening to their families at this time, especially as now they're taking on the additional task of implementing an IEP and not just being part of a team that creates that. I think if we can, on a systems level, really address these things, and really, I wish that from DCPS's standpoint, that there really be a real energy around redirecting what an IEP team should be like really giving new flavor and re-energizing that with the spirit of collaboration, interdisciplinary collaboration, new things. Burnout will be less, families will be empowered, and they'll feel authentically okay to show up as they are and not just ducking texts and phones or what may happen if they're feeling burnt out and not heard or not seen in their reality and what may make them burn out.
Thank you so much, Dr. Oruh. And we are at time. I want to thank all of our amazing panelists for joining us. Just in case people are catching us at the latter end of this, everyone can unmute themselves and just reintroduce yourself and what you do again. And then I just want to say it's been great having everyone here. You all have answered a lot of great questions, and a lot of people who are messaging me privately, email, Facebook, all the above, are really appreciative of your expertise and your feedback. So just reintroduce yourselves and we'll find our way on out.
Hi, this is Toby Long, and I want to thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. And I have to say what Chioma just said sort of wraps it all up.
Oh, yeah.
I think that was a really wonderful message. I guess, LeRay, you planted that as your wrap up.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Chapman.
Oh, yes, Charles Chapman, assistant principal at Forbush School at Prince George's. It was a pleasure collaborating with all of you professionals today. Pleasure meeting you all, and I wish you all well in your paths and stay safe.
Miss LeRay.
Sure. Everyone, this has been a pleasure. It's been an amazing collaborative effort. I pray that it is encouraging to other educators and families out there. Again, I'm Tamika LeRay, a speech and language pathologist.
Ms. Pinckney.
Hi, everyone. Again, Margot Pinckney, a teaching fellow, fourth grade teacher. Thank you.
Ms. Dashiell.
Been a pleasure. Chizarra Dashiell, behavior specialist.
Ms. Kelly.
Jerae Kelly, doctoral candidate at the University of Maryland. I just want to end with saying that there are, I think, positives like Mr. Johnson and Ms. Amison were talking about. We have an itinerant teacher population already that goes into homes that has done this previously. We have distance learning. I think there's strengths that we can learn from those programs as we move forward. So,
thank you. Ms. Amison.
Hi again, LeRay, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Tamara Amison, licensed professional clinician. I do want to make sure families know that there are mental health supports out there. Psychology Today is one that you can go off of your insurance. They do have sliding fee scales. There are lots of resources. I put a few in the chat, but if you need more, please just email me. I have a lot of them, and I'd be glad to help. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And Mr. Johnson?
Hey, again, I'm Jeremiah Johnson. I'm instructional coach for special education. I'm really blessed and humbled to have just been part of this conversation. Each one of you all inspire me, and I appreciate you all. So I wish you the best moving forward.
And we're ending with Dr. Oruh.
All right, again, my name is Chioma Oruh, and I am the founder and principal consultant at Bornfree. And I just want to shout out like a couple of the organizations that I'm currently consulting with. One is the Bright Beam Network, which is a Minneapolis-based organization working with a team of 5 parent leaders to really talk about the achievement gap for Black and Brown students with disabilities in DC. Another is the George Washington University Center for Health and Human Health, DHHS. Well, the Milken School of Public Health, I'm so sorry. But we're basically what we work on is the school behavioral health program in DC, which is really important because it does motivate this 2-generational approach where the parent and the child really through the tiered systems can really receive what they need, especially at this time. And that's in collaboration with the DC Department of Behavioral Health. And of course, Advocates for Justice in Education, which is the Parent Training and Information Center here in the District of Columbia, in which we work on a parent ambassador program for parents who are of older kids with disabilities, supporting new parents birth to 3 as they begin their journey. So those are my love projects, and it's and the GW Center, please don't kill me for forgetting the exact acronym for that, and just really really proud to be a part of this network. I wish all of our kids had access to all you great therapists, and that they will eventually get what they need and when they need it with people like you at the front line. So thank you all for your service.
Thank you so much. This has been a great webinar presented by Realize Solutions. Look out for future webinars. You might see some of these faces maybe in the future, maybe not. We might add a few little things, spice it up. In the meantime, please consider donating to our panelists. All proceeds are divided equally among them. And we're saying goodbye. Have a good one.